Hey everyone, Claire here. Before I tell you how I turned the most devastating betrayal of my life into the ultimate comeback story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever had someone you trusted completely destroy something precious to you. Trust me, you're gonna want to stick around for this one. I'm 29 now, running my own real estate development firm with a portfolio worth more than my sister's husband's entire failed company. But this story starts 15 years ago in a little two-story house on Maple Street that meant everything to me, and apparently nothing to the people who were supposed to love me most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That house wasn't just where I grew up. It was where my soul learned to breathe. Built in 1952, it had character in every creaky floorboard and personality in every chipped paint corner. The front porch swing where Mom would sit with her morning coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. The kitchen with its yellow walls and the little herb garden on the windowsill that she tended like it held all the world's secrets. And my favorite spot, the window seat in what used to be Mom's sewing room, where I could curl up with a book and feel completely safe from whatever chaos the outside world threw at me. My mom, Maria Ramirez, was the kind of woman who could make a house feel like a home just by walking through it. She had this way of humming while she cooked, these little Mexican lullabies her grandmother taught her, and the whole house would feel warm and alive. Even after Dad left when I was 12, just packed up one Tuesday and never looked back, Mom kept that house running like a sanctuary. Mija, she'd tell me while we worked in her garden behind the house, dirt under our fingernails and the smell of tomatoes heavy in the summer air. A home isn't about the walls or the roof. It's about the love you put into every corner, the memories you build in every room. She'd pat the soil around her prized roses and smile. But sometimes, when you pour enough love into a place, it holds on to that love and gives it back to you when you need it most. God, I believe that with everything I had. Isabel, my older sister, never seemed to get it. 3 years older than me, she spent most of her time in that house complaining about what it lacked. No walk-in closets, no updated bathrooms, no central air conditioning. While I was helping Mom refinish the old hardwood floors we'd found under layers of carpet, Isabel was cutting out pictures of mansions from magazines and planning her escape to somewhere worthy of her potential. Don't get me wrong, I loved my sister, but we might as well have been living in different universes. Where I saw character, she saw inconvenience. Where I saw history, she saw outdated. Where I saw home, she saw a stepping stone to something better. When Mom got sick during my sophomore year of high school, that house became even more sacred to me. Lung cancer, aggressive and cruel. I'd come home every day to find her getting a little smaller, a little more fragile, but still humming in that kitchen, still tending to her plants like hope was something you could grow in soil. Isabel was away at college then, studying business at some expensive private school Mom somehow scraped together the money for. She'd visit on weekends when she could, but mostly it was just me and Mom, making the most of whatever time we had left. The night before Mom died, she called me into her room. The same room where she used to read me bedtime stories, where she'd French braid my hair for school pictures, where she'd held me when I cried about Dad leaving. "Mija," she whispered, her voice papery thin, but her eyes still bright. "This house has been good to us. When I'm gone, I need you to promise me something." I was crying before she even finished the sentence. "Promise me you'll remember that home isn't something someone can take from you. It's something you carry inside. But this house," she gestured weakly around the room, at the family photos covering the dresser, at the quilt her own mother had made, at the walls that had heard all our secrets and dreams. "This house loves you back, Mija. Don't let anyone convince you it's just wood and nails." I promised her. Of course I promised her. Mom died 3 days later, on a Tuesday morning when the light coming through her bedroom window made everything look golden and peaceful. Isabel made it home for the funeral.
crying beautifully in her designer black dress, while relatives I barely knew told her how sorry they were for her loss. But here's the thing nobody talks about when you lose your mom. The world doesn't stop. Bills keep coming, decisions need to be made, and suddenly you're 18 years old trying to figure out how to keep the lights on in a house that feels too big and too empty without the person who made it feel like home. Isabel had graduated college by then and was living in the city, working for some marketing firm and dating Daniel Carter, whose family owned a successful construction company. She had her life figured out, her path mapped, her future secured. I had community college classes, a part-time job at the local diner, and a house full of memories I couldn't afford to maintain. That should have been the end of the story. Two sisters figuring out how to move forward after losing their anchor. But Isabel had other plans. Plans that would shatter everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and the difference between a house and a home. For 6 months after Mom's funeral, I lived in that house like I was keeping a promise to a ghost. Every morning, I'd make coffee in her favorite mug, the one with the chip on the handle that she refused to throw away because it still holds coffee just fine. I'd water her plants, tend her garden, and pretend that keeping everything exactly as she left it would somehow bring back the warmth that died with her. But reality has a way of crashing through denial, and mine came in the form of a property tax notice that made my stomach drop. The house Mom had owned outright suddenly owed the city more money than I made in 3 months at the diner. Apparently, she'd taken out a second mortgage during her illness, something she never told me, probably to spare me the worry. I spread the bills across the kitchen table where we used to do homework together, my hands shaking as I calculated and recalculated numbers that never got smaller. Property taxes, utilities, insurance, the mortgage payment I didn't even know existed. It all added up to an impossible mountain of debt that my diner wages and community college schedule couldn't even dent. That's when I called Isabel. "Hey, sis," she answered, on the third ring, and I could hear city noise in the background. Car horns, people talking, the sound of a life that had moved on. "Not great," I admitted, staring at the stack of overdue notices. "Isabel, I need help. The house. There's a mortgage I didn't know about, and the taxes are due, and I don't know what to do." Silence on the other end. Then, "Oh, Claire, Mom never told you about the loan? You knew, and you didn't tell me? She made me promise not to worry you while you were still in school. She thought she'd beat the cancer, thought she'd have time to figure it out." Isabel's voice softened. "Honey, how much do you owe?" I told her the number, and the silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Claire, that's a lot of money." "I know it's a lot of money, but maybe if we work together, if you could help with some of the payments until I finish school and get a better job." "Sweetie, I can't take on that kind of debt. Daniel and I are planning our wedding, and we're looking at houses in his neighborhood. We can't afford 2 mortgages."
2 mortgages. Like Mom's house was some investment property instead of the place where we'd built our entire childhood. "It's our family home, Isabel." "It's a house, Claire. A house we can't afford." Her voice took on that older sister tone I'd always hated, the one that made me feel like a naive child. "Look, I've been thinking about this since the funeral. The smart thing to do is sell it. The neighborhood's gentrifying. Property values are up. We could probably get enough to pay off the mortgage and split what's left." The words hit me like a physical blow. Sell Mom's house? "It's not Mom's house anymore, Claire. It's ours, and we can't afford it. I know it's hard, but you have to be practical about this." Practical. That word would haunt me for years. What if I could make it work? What if I got a full-time job, dropped out of school for a while? And do what? Wait tables for the rest of your life so you can live in a house that's falling apart? Isabel's voice was getting sharper now, impatient. Claire, you're 18. You should be thinking about your future, not clinging to the past. But she didn't understand. The past wasn't something I was clinging to. It was the foundation everything else was built on. That house held every good memory I had of Mom, every moment of safety I'd ever known. Just give me 6 months, I begged. Let me try to figure something out. Fine, 6 months. But Claire, if you can't make the payments work by then, we're selling. I won't let this debt follow us around forever. I should have known then what was coming. I should have recognized the tone in her voice, the way she said, "We're selling," like it was already decided. But I was 18 and desperate and still believed that family meant something. For the next 4 months, I worked like I was possessed. I picked up every shift at the diner, cleaned houses on weekends, tutored high school kids in math and English. I sold everything Mom had left me that had any value, her jewelry, her china, even her sewing machine, though every piece felt like I was selling off pieces of my own heart. I was actually making progress. Slow, exhausting progress, but progress. I'd caught up on the utilities and made partial payments on the property taxes. The mortgage was still a monster, but I had a plan, a budget, a future where I could keep the house and maybe even go back to school part-time. Then Daniel Parter entered the picture. Isabel brought him home on a Saturday in October, and I knew immediately that everything was about to change. He walked through our house like he was appraising it, making comments about good bones and potential while running his hands along the walls Mom had painted by herself the summer before she got sick. "This is a great neighborhood," he told Isabel while I served them coffee in the living room. "Really up and coming. These old houses are gold mines if you know what you're doing with them." Isabel was hanging on his every word, practically glowing with the attention. Daniel Carter was everything our father hadn't been: successful, confident, present, and he saw opportunity where I saw home. "You know," he continued, "I could probably get you a great price for this place. I know some investors who specialize in renovation flips. They pay cash, close fast." "Actually," I interrupted, "I'm working on keeping the house. I've got a payment plan." "Claire," Isabel's voice cut through mine like a blade. "We've talked about this." But we hadn't talked. She'd decided, and I was fighting a losing battle I didn't even know I was in. The end came 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning that started just like any other. I was getting ready for my morning shift at the diner when I found the real estate sign in our front yard. Sold. Isabel was sitting at the kitchen table when I ran inside, paperwork spread in front of her like evidence of a crime. "You sold it." My voice came out as a whisper. "We sold it," she corrected, not looking up from the papers. "I tried calling you last night, but you were at work." "You sold our mother's house while I was at work." "I sold a house we couldn't afford to keep, someone who can actually take care of it." She finally looked at me, and there wasn't a trace of guilt in her eyes. "Claire, they paid cash, full asking price. After we settled the mortgage and the back taxes, there's enough left for you to put a deposit on an apartment and maybe even go back to school full-time. I didn't want to sell." "You're 18, Claire. You don't get to make financial decisions that affect both of us." And there it was, the truth I'd been too naive to see. In Isabel's world, I was still a child whose opinion didn't matter, whose heart wasn't worth considering, whose promise to Mom was just sentimental nonsense getting in the way of smart business. The new owners were taking possession in 30 days. I had a month to pack up a lifetime of memories and find somewhere else to call home. As I watched Isabel drive away that afternoon, headed back to her real life with Daniel Carter, I made a promise that would shape everything that came after. I would never again let someone else have the power to take away what mattered to me. I just didn't know yet that keeping that promise would eventually give me the power to take everything away from her. The studio apartment I moved into after Isabel sold our house was a shoebox with a kitchenette and a view of the dumpster behind a Chinese restaurant. Rent was $400 a month, which was exactly what I could afford after working 60-hour weeks between the diner and my weekend cleaning jobs. It was everything our family home wasn't: cramped, sterile,
temporary. But you know what? It was mine. Every bill, every decision, every stick of secondhand furniture I dragged up those 3 flights of stairs belonged to me and no one else. I'll be honest with you guys, those first 2 years after losing the house were brutal. I'd wake up every morning in that tiny apartment, and for just a split second, I'd forget where I was. I'd expect to smell mom's coffee brewing, to hear the old house settling around me like a familiar blanket. Instead, I got car alarms and the neighbor upstairs practicing violin at 6 a.m. But here's what I learned about rock bottom. It's actually a pretty solid foundation to build on. I threw myself into community college like my life depended on it, because honestly, it did. Business administration with a focus on real estate, night classes that fit around my work schedule. While other kids my age were partying and figuring out their majors, I was studying property law at 2 a.m. and calculating mortgage payments in my head while serving coffee. My professors thought I was crazy, this kid who asked questions about commercial development and property investment like I was planning to buy Manhattan. But I had a fire in me that Isabel's betrayal had lit, and I was going to let it burn until it forged me into something unbreakable. That's when I met Eleanor Brooks. Eleanor walked into the diner on a rainy Thursday morning, this sharp-dressed woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She ordered black coffee and wheat toast, then proceeded to spread property listing sheets across table 6 like she was planning a military campaign. "Real estate?" I asked her, refilling her coffee. She looked up at me with interest. "You know the business?" "I'm studying it, community college, but I'm planning to transfer to state for their development program." Something in my voice must have caught her attention, so she closed her laptop and really looked at me. "What's your story, kid?" Most people who asked that question wanted gossip or small talk. Eleanor Brooks wanted truth. So I told her about mom, about the house, about Isabel's betrayal, about my plan to build something that no one could ever take away from me. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she handed me her business card. "Eleanor Brooks, Brooks Development. I buy distressed properties, fix them up, and either flip them or turn them into rental income. It's not glamorous work, but it's profitable, and it teaches you everything you need to know about this business." She paused, studying my face. "I need a weekend assistant, someone who's not afraid of hard work and who understands that every property has a story. Interested?" That was the beginning of everything. Working for Eleanor was like getting a masterclass in real estate from someone who'd built an empire from nothing. She taught me to see potential where others saw problems, to calculate risk against reward, to understand that in real estate, emotion is both your greatest weakness and your most powerful tool. The key, she told me one Saturday as we walked through a condemned Victorian that most people would have bulldozed, is learning the difference between a house with good bones and a house that's just broken. You can fix structural problems, update electrical, modernize plumbing, but you can't fix bad location, and you can't manufacture character. She stopped in what had once been a grand living room, now water-damaged and covered in graffiti. "This house has character. It just needs someone who can see past the damage to what it could become." I thought about Mom's house, about the character Isabel had dismissed as outdated, about the potential Daniel Carter had seen in dollar signs instead of love. "How do you know the difference?" I asked. Eleanor smiled. "You learn to listen. Houses tell you their stories if you're paying attention. The good ones, the ones worth saving, they fight back against neglect. They hold on to their dignity even when everything else falls apart." By my second year working with Eleanor, I was handling my own small projects. Nothing major, a duplex here, a small apartment building there, but every property I touched taught me something new. I learned to negotiate with contractors, to spot foundation problems from 50 feet away, to calculate renovation costs down to the last nail. More importantly, I learned that success in real estate wasn't just about money. It was about vision, the ability to see what something could become instead of just what it was. When I finally transferred to State University, I wasn't just another business student. I was Eleanor's protege, someone who'd spent 3 years learning the real estate business from the ground up. My professors were impressed. My classmates were intimidated. And Isabel, who called me once during my junior year to check in, was surprised. "You sound different," she said during that awkward phone conversation. "Different how?" "Confident, focused, like you've got your life figured out." I did have my life figured out. I knew exactly what I was building and why. I just didn't tell her that what I was building was designed to ensure that no one, especially not her, would ever have power over me again. By the time I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I had my real estate license, 3 years of hands-on experience with Eleanor, and a 5-year plan that would make me financially untouchable. What I didn't have was any contact with my sister, who'd sent a graduation card with a generic message about being proud of me. What I didn't know was that while I was building my empire, Daniel Carter's construction company was starting to crumble. And what I definitely didn't know was that karma was about to hand me the perfect opportunity for revenge on a silver platter. The wedding invitation arrived on expensive cardstock, the kind that whispers money before you even read the words. Isabel Marie Ramirez was marrying Daniel Carter in what the invitation described as an intimate celebration at the Riverside Country Club. I stared at that piece of paper for a long time, sitting in my new office at Brooks Development where Eleanor had just made me a junior partner. 6 years had passed since the house betrayal, and this was the first communication I had received from my sister beyond birthday cards with increasingly generic messages.
The smart thing would have been to throw the invitation away and forget I had a sister. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested in seeing how Isabel's life had turned out. So I bought a dress that cost more than my old monthly rent and drove to the Riverside Country Club like I was heading into battle. The country club was exactly what I'd expected. All marble floors and crystal chandeliers, the kind of place where the parking lot was full of BMWs and the servers called you ma'am with practiced politeness. I felt the weight of every choice I'd made over the past 6 years, every sacrifice and sleepless night that had brought me to this moment where I could walk into this world and belong. Claire? I turned to find my cousin Maria staring at me with wide eyes. "Oh my God, look at you! You look incredible!" It was true. 6 years of hard work and Eleanor's mentorship had transformed me into someone who knew how to carry herself. The dress was designer, my confidence was earned, and I'd learned to speak the language of success fluently. "Thanks, Prima. You look great too." I hugged her, scanning the room for familiar faces. "How's the bride?" "Radiant and nervous. I think she's been worried you wouldn't come." Worried. Interesting word choice. I found Isabel in the bridal suite, surrounded by a cloud of satin and pearls, looking every inch the successful woman she'd always planned to become. She was thinner than I remembered, more polished, with a kind of highlights that cost more than most people make in a week. "Claire?" She turned when she saw me in the mirror, and for just a moment, I saw something vulnerable flash across her face. "You came. Wouldn't miss it." I kept my voice neutral, pleasant. 6 years in business had taught me to control my expressions, to never let anyone see what I was really thinking. "You look," she paused, taking in my appearance, "successful." "I am successful. No point in false modesty." The reception was a masterclass in wealth and status. Daniel's family had clearly spared no expense, and I watched Isabel work the room like she had been born to it, introducing herself as the future Mrs. Carter with the kind of confidence that only comes from finally getting everything you've always wanted. I was nursing a glass of champagne at the bar when Daniel approached me, loosening his tie with the relaxed air of a man celebrating his victory. "Claire, right? The practical sister?" He extended his hand and I noticed his watch cost more than Eleanor's entire car. "Isabel's told me a lot about you." All good things, I hope? He laughed, the kind of laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. She says you're in real estate. Residential? Commercial development, actually. I work with Eleanor Brooks. Something shifted in his expression. Eleanor's reputation preceded her in development circles, and Daniel was smart enough to recognize the name. Brooks Development. That's impressive for someone so young. There it was. That subtle condescension wrapped in a compliment. The implication that my success was somehow surprising, somehow less legitimate because of my age or my background. What about you? I asked, sipping my champagne. How's the construction business? Booming. Can't keep up with demand, honestly. We're expanding into commercial projects, some major contracts coming down the pipeline. He puffed up with pride. Carter Enterprises is becoming a real player in the regional market. I nodded politely, filing away his overconfidence for future reference. In my experience, people who felt the need to oversell their success were usually compensating for something. The conversation was interrupted by Isabel appearing at Daniel's side, her arm sliding possessively through his. "Are you two talking business at my wedding?" she asked with forced lightness. "Just getting to know my new sister-in-law," Daniel replied, pressing a kiss to his temple. "She's quite accomplished."
She always was the ambitious one, Isabel said, and there was something in her tone that made me look at her more carefully. Even as kids, Claire always had these big plans, these dreams about what she was going to build. It was a compliment that felt like criticism, praise that carried the weight of old resentments. "Speaking of building," Daniel continued, oblivious to the undercurrent between his wife and me, "maybe we should collaborate sometime. Carter Enterprises could use someone with Brooks Development's reputation for our commercial expansion." I smiled, the kind of smile Eleanor had taught me, polite, non-committal, revealing nothing. Maybe. I'll have to see what projects we have coming up. Later that night, driving home past the neighborhood where our childhood house used to stand, I thought about the evening's revelations. Isabel had gotten everything she'd always wanted: the wealthy husband, the country club lifestyle, the escape from anything that reminded her of where she came from. But I'd seen something in her eyes during our brief conversation, something that looked almost like regret. And I'd heard something in Daniel Carter's voice when he talked about his business, something that sounded like a man trying to convince himself as much as his audience. Success, I had learned, wasn't just about having money or status. It was about building something solid, something that could weather storms and survive challenges. As I pulled into the parking garage of my downtown condo, I wondered if Daniel Carter's empire was as strong as he claimed it was. I wouldn't have to wonder for long. The first crack in Daniel Carter's perfect facade appeared in the business section of the local newspaper 2 years after his wedding. A small article buried on page 3 about delayed construction projects and contractor disputes. Most people probably skipped right over it, but when you've spent 8 years learning to read between the lines of real estate deals, you develop an eye for trouble. "Carter Enterprises faces setbacks on downtown mixed-use development," read the headline, and the article detailed cost overruns, permit issues, and unforeseen complications that had pushed back completion dates by 6 months. I was reading it over my morning coffee when Eleanor walked into my office, carrying her own newspaper and wearing the expression she got when she smelled opportunity. "You see this?" She dropped the paper on my desk, pointing to the same article I'd been studying. Hard to miss. Cost overruns on a project that size usually mean bigger problems. Eleanor settled into the chair across from my desk, her sharp eyes calculating. "Daniel Carter called me yesterday. Wanted to discuss a strategic partnership for some upcoming projects." That got my attention. In the 8 years I'd known Eleanor, developers didn't call her for partnerships. They called her for bailouts. What kind of partnership? The kind where we provide capital and expertise, while they provide, what, their good name? Eleanor's laugh was dry. I told him I'd think about it. I stared at the newspaper, my mind racing. Daniel Carter, who dismissed me as the practical sister 2 years ago, was now trying to partner with my mentor, the same Daniel Carter who'd boasted about his booming business and expansion plans at his wedding reception. There's more, Eleanor continued. I made some calls after he contacted me. Word is, Carter Enterprises took on too much debt during their expansion. They've got 3 major projects running simultaneously, all behind schedule, all over budget. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel Carter, who'd convinced my sister to sell our family home because we couldn't afford to keep it, was now drowning in debt himself. "What are you thinking?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "I'm thinking we keep our eyes open. Companies like Carter Enterprises don't usually recover from this kind of overextension. When they go under, there are usually assets worth acquiring."
Over the next 6 months, I watched Daniel Carter's empire crumble in slow motion. It started with small signs: subcontractors posting liens on properties, suppliers demanding payment upfront, key employees jumping ship to more stable companies. The local business journal ran a follow-up article about Carter Enterprises restructuring operations, which in construction speak meant they were hemorrhaging money. I started making it my business to know Daniel's business, not out of malice, at least not entirely. Eleanor had taught me that successful developers stayed informed about every major player in the market, especially the ones who were failing. When companies went under, they left opportunities in their wake. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me that felt a dark satisfaction watching Daniel's overconfidence turn to desperation. The breaking point came when Eleanor got a call from Carter Enterprises' lawyer. "They want to meet," she told me, hanging up the phone with a thoughtful expression. "Formal presentation about investment opportunities with their company." Investment opportunities or bailout requests? Probably both. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, studying me with the look she got when she was about to make me an offer I couldn't refuse. My heart stopped. "What? You know more about Carter Enterprises than anyone else in this office. You've been tracking their decline for months, you understand their market position, and frankly, you've got better instincts for distressed properties than most developers with 20 years' experience." She paused, her expression becoming more serious. "Besides, if we're going to acquire their assets, I want someone handling the negotiations who won't let personal feelings cloud their judgment." Personal feelings. Eleanor knew exactly who Daniel Carter was to me, exactly what his family had taken from me, and she was offering me the chance to sit across a conference table from the man who'd helped destroy my childhood and decide his financial fate. "When's the meeting?" "Friday, 2 o'clock, their offices." I spent the rest of the week preparing like I was going to war. I analyzed every public record, every permit filing, every piece of financial information I could get my hands on. By Thursday night, I knew more about Carter Enterprises' financial situation than Daniel probably did. They were worse than broke. They were in debt up to their eyeballs with no way out except finding someone stupid enough to throw good money after bad. Or someone smart enough to buy their assets for pennies on the dollar when they inevitably went under. Friday morning, I put on my most expensive suit, the one that screams success and competence, and drove to Carter Enterprises' offices for the first time since that terrible day when Daniel had walked through my childhood home, appraising it like a piece of merchandise. The offices were impressive, all glass and steel designed to project strength and prosperity. But I'd learned to look past surfaces to the foundation beneath, and what I saw were the telltale signs of a company in trouble: empty cubicles, outdated equipment, and the kind of desperate energy that comes from people trying to save a sinking ship. Daniel was waiting in the conference room when I arrived, looking older and more tired than he had at his wedding. His $1,000 suit couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes or the way his hands shook slightly when he reached out to shake mine. "Claire, thank you for coming. I have to admit I was surprised when Eleanor said she was sending you instead of coming herself." "Eleanor trusts my judgment on acquisitions," I replied smoothly, taking my seat across from him.
She thought I might have some insights into your company's situation. For the next hour, I listened to Daniel's presentation about partnership opportunities and strategic alliances. He talked about Carter Enterprises' temporary setbacks and short-term liquidity challenges, like they were minor bumps in the road, instead of the warning signs of total collapse.
When he finished, I set down my pen and looked him directly in the eyes. Mr. Carter, let's skip the sales pitch and talk about what you really need. You're not looking for a partner. You're looking for someone to save your company. The mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw the fear underneath. And the question is, I continued, why should Brooks Development throw money at a failing company when we could simply wait for you to go bankrupt and buy your best assets at auction? That's when I knew I had him. And that's when I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting back what was taken from you. Sometimes it's taking everything. The silence in the conference room stretched like a tightrope after I delivered my ultimatum. Daniel's face had gone pale, and I could practically see him calculating how much I knew about his company's real situation. Spoiler alert, I knew everything. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said finally, trying to regain his composure. Carter Enterprises isn't failing. We're simply looking to expand our capital base for new opportunities. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Daniel, I've done my homework. Your company has $2.3 million in outstanding debt, 3 projects that are hemorrhaging money, and subcontractors who haven't been paid in 60 days. Your biggest client just canceled their contract, and your line of credit is maxed out. His confident mask cracked completely. How did you know all of this? Because it's my job to know. Because Eleanor taught me that in real estate, information is power, and I make it my business to have power. I lean forward, my voice steady and professional. So let's stop pretending this is about partnership and talk about what you really need, a buyout. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, and for a moment he looked every bit as desperate as I'd felt the day Isabel sold our house. The difference was, I'd been 18 and powerless. He was a grown man who'd built his own cage. "What are you proposing?" he asked quietly. "Brooks Development acquires Carter Enterprises. We take on your debt, honor your existing contracts, and keep your employees. In exchange, we get your assets, your client list, and your company name." "And what do I get?" I smiled, the kind of smile that Eleanor had taught me, polite, professional, and absolutely ruthless. "You get to walk away without declaring bankruptcy. You get to keep your house, your cars, your country club membership. You get to maintain the lifestyle that your wife has become accustomed to." The mention of Isabel hit its mark. Daniel's jaw tightened, and I could see him realizing that this wasn't just business anymore. This was personal. "You're Isabel's sister," he said, as if he was just putting the pieces together. "This is about the house, isn't it?" "This is about business, Daniel, but yes, I'm Isabel's sister. The one you called practical at your wedding. The one whose family home you helped sell for parts." I kept my voice level, professional. "And now I'm the one sitting across from you with the power to save or destroy everything you've built." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the documents spread across the table. "What's the offer?" I slid a single sheet of paper across to him. $1. $1? His voice cracked. "For a company with negative equity, it's generous. We're essentially paying you to take on your debt and save your reputation." I gathered my papers calmly. "Of course, if you'd prefer to handle this through bankruptcy court, that's your choice. But I should mention that Brooks Development will be at that auction too,
And we'll pay considerably less than $1 for your assets once the lawyers and fees eat through whatever's left. The mouth was brutal and simple. Daniel could sell to me now and walk away with his dignity intact. Or he could fight it and lose everything, including his pride. I need to think about this, discuss it with my partners, with Isabel. Daniel. I stood up, straightening my jacket. This offer expires at 5 p.m. today. After that, Brooks Development withdraws our interest, and you can handle your debt situation however you see fit. That's not enough time.
It's plenty of time to make a phone call. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Daniel, when you discuss this with Isabel, you might want to mention that this is the same company that's been tracking Carter Enterprises' decline for the past 8 months. The same company that knows exactly how much your house is worth, how much you owe on it, and what happens to country club memberships when the fees go unpaid. I left him sitting in that conference room, surrounded by the documents that proved his empire was built on sand. At 4:47 p.m., my phone rang. "We accept your offer." Daniel's voice was hollow, defeated. "Excellent. I'll have the contracts drawn up tonight. We can sign tomorrow morning." "Claire, wait." There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller, almost human. "Does Isabel know about any of this?" I thought about my sister, probably at home in the house that my childhood home had helped pay for, oblivious to the fact that her comfortable life was about to become entirely dependent on my goodwill. "Not yet," I said. "But she will." The next morning, I walked into the same conference room where Daniel had once tried to convince me he was doing well. This time, I was carrying the contracts that would make me the owner of everything he'd built. Eleanor had insisted on being there for the signing, partially for legal protection and partially, I suspected, because she wanted to witness what she called the most poetic business acquisition she'd ever seen. Daniel signed the papers with shaking hands, officially transferring Carter Enterprises to Brooks Development for the sum of $1. When it was done, he looked up at me with something that might have been respect mixed with terror. "What happens now?" "Now? Now I save your company, honor your contracts, and make sure your employees keep their jobs. Because, unlike some people, I understand that business decisions affect real people's lives." The dig was subtle, but unmistakable. Isabel had sold our house with no thought for what it meant to me. I was buying his company and choosing to be better than that. As Daniel gathered his things to leave, he stopped at the door. "For what it's worth, Claire, I'm sorry. About the house, about dismissing you, about everything." I nodded, accepting his apology without forgiveness. "Send Isabel my regards." After he left, Eleanor turned to me with the grin that was pure predator satisfaction. "So, how does it feel to own your brother-in-law's life?" I looked out the window at the city I'd learned to navigate, the business I'd helped build, the empire I was still constructing one strategic move at a time. It feels like justice. But, as I soon discovered, justice and satisfaction are two very different things. The call came at 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after I'd signed the papers making me Daniel's boss. I was reviewing project timelines in my new office, Daniel's old office actually, when my assistant buzzed in. "Ms. Ramirez, there's an Isabel Carter on line 1. She says she's your sister." I'd been expecting this call, but my stomach still tightened when I heard her name. "Put her through." "Claire." Isabel's voice was sharp, controlled, but I could hear the underlying panic. "We need to talk." "Good morning to you too, Isabel. How's married life?" "Don't." The word came out like a slap. "Don't pretend this is a social call. Daniel told me what you did." "What I did? You mean saved his company from bankruptcy? Kept his employees from losing their jobs? Honored his contract so his reputation stays intact?" I leaned back in Daniel's chair, my chair, now,
and watched the morning traffic through windows that used to be his view. You're welcome. He bought his company for $1, Claire. $1! Do you have any idea how humiliating? Actually, I have a very good idea how humiliating it feels to have someone take something important from you without your consent. Funny how that works. The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of unspoken resentment. It's about the house, she said finally. This is about business. The house was personal. This, I gestured around the office, even though she couldn't see me, is just good business sense.
I want to see you in person today. I checked my calendar, though I already knew what I was going to say. I'm busy today. How about Thursday? I could fit you in between my 2 p.m. and my 3:30. Fit me in? Her voice rose an octave. Claire, I'm your sister. Yes, you are. The sister who sold our mother's house while I was at work trying to save it. The sister who chose her convenience over my heartbreak. The sister who disappeared for 6 years and only calls when she needs something. I kept my voice professional, businesslike. So yes, Isabel, I can fit you in on Thursday. She hung up on me. Thursday arrived with Isabel storming into my office like she still had the right to take up space in my world without permission. She looked exactly like she had at her wedding, polished, expensive, untouchable, but there were cracks in her armor now. Dark circles under her carefully applied makeup and tension in her shoulders that no amount of designer clothing could hide. This is quite an upgrade from the diner, she said, looking around the office with obvious resentment. Hard work pays off. I didn't stand up, didn't offer her coffee, didn't make any of the social gestures that sisters usually made. What can I do for you, Isabel? You can explain to me how buying my husband's company isn't revenge. Because revenge would have been letting him go bankrupt and lose everything. Revenge would have been watching you lose your house, your lifestyle, your security. I finally stood, moving to the window that overlooked the construction site of our latest project. What I did was business. Business? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're controlling our lives now, Claire. Every decision Daniel makes has to go through you. Every paycheck he earns comes from you. Do you know what that's doing to him? To us? I turned to face her, and for the first time in this conversation, I let my real feelings show. Do you know what it did to me when you sold our house? When you took away the only thing I had left of Mom? When you made me homeless so you could pay for your wedding and your new life? That was different. How was that different? Because we needed the money. Because keeping that house would have ruined both of us financially. And Daniel needed this buyout because keeping his company was going to ruin your family financially. I could have let that happen, Isabel. I could have let him lose everything the way you let me lose everything. I moved closer to her, my voice steady and calm. But I didn't, because I'm not you. The words hit her like a physical blow. She sank into the chair across from my desk, and for a moment, she looked like the older sister I'd once looked up to instead of the polished stranger she'd become. What do you want from us? She asked quietly. I want you to understand what it feels like to need someone else's permission to keep your life intact. I want you to know what it's like when your security depends entirely on another person's goodwill. I sat back down, studying her face. But mostly, Isabel, I want you to do your job well and let me run this company the way it should have been run from the beginning. And Daniel? Daniel is learning to be an employee instead of a boss. It's an adjustment, but he's adapting. I softened my voice slightly. I'm not trying to destroy him, Isabel. If I wanted to destroy him, I would have. I'm trying to save what can be saved and build something better.
She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw her really seeing me for the first time in years. Not the little sister who'd needed protecting, not the victim who'd lost her house, but the woman I'd become. "You've changed," she said. "Yes, I have. Betrayal will do that to a person."
And now, I thought about the question, about power and revenge, and the difference between justice and satisfaction. Now I build something that no one can take away from me. And maybe, if you're very good at your job and very lucky, I'll let you be part of it. Isabel left my office that day, knowing exactly where she stood in my world. And for the first time since I'd lost our childhood home, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. 3 months into my ownership of Carter Enterprises, I was working late when my assistant knocked on the office door. "Miss Ramirez, Mrs. Carter is here. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent." I looked up from the quarterly reports I'd been reviewing, reports that showed the company was finally stabilizing under competent management, and felt that familiar tightness in my chest that always came when Isabel entered my world uninvited. "Send her in." Isabel walked into my office looking like she'd been crying, her perfect composure cracked in a way I'd never seen before. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and she was carrying a bottle of wine that was clearly half empty. "We need to talk," she said, setting the bottle on my desk with more force than necessary. "Isabel, are you drunk?" "Not drunk enough." She collapsed into the chair across from my desk, the same chair where she'd sat 3 months ago demanding explanations. "Do you know what today is?" I glanced at my calendar. "Thursday, October, it's Mom's birthday." The words came out broken, raw. Today would have been Mom's 58th birthday, and I realized I have no idea where she's buried because I was too busy with my wedding plans to pay attention to the funeral arrangements you handled alone. The accusation hit me like a slap. "You were there, Isabel. You gave a eulogy." "I gave a performance," she laughed bitterly, reaching for the wine bottle. "I stood up there in my black designer dress and said all the right things about what a wonderful mother she was, but I couldn't tell you the name of the cemetery if my life depended on it." I watched my sister fall apart in my office, and despite everything between us, I felt something crack inside my chest. Peaceful Gardens, Section C, Plot 47. There's a bench nearby where I sit sometimes. "You visit her grave?" "Every month. Sometimes more." I set down my pen, giving her my full attention. "What's this really about, Isabel?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the wine bottle like it held answers. "Daniel asked me to talk to you about the Riverside Project." The Riverside Project was Carter Enterprises' biggest remaining contract, a mixed-use development that had been hemorrhaging money under Daniel's management. Under mine, it was finally on track to finish on time and under budget. "What about it?" "He wants to know if there's any way he could buy back a piece of the company, maybe partner with you on future projects." He looked up at me with eyes that were too bright, too desperate. "He hates working for you, Claire. He hates that you saved us, hates that he needs you, hates that you're better at running his company than he ever was." "And what do you think I should do about Daniel's hurt feelings?" "I think—" She stopped, swallowed hard, then started again. "I think you should know that buying his company wasn't just revenge on him. It was revenge on me, too. And I'm starting to understand why." I leaned back in my chair, studying my sister's face. "Go on." "The house wasn't just about money, was it? It was about being heard, about having your opinion matter, about being treated like an equal instead of like a child whose feelings didn't count." Tears were streaming down her face now, ruining what was left of her makeup. "I was so jealous of you." The confession came out in a rush, like she'd been holding it back for years. "Mom loved us both, but she understood you in a way she never understood me. You could fix things, build things, make things work. I was just pretty, charming, good at getting people to give me what I wanted. Isabel. No, let me finish. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek. When Mom got sick, I didn't know how to help her. I didn't know how to be strong, like you were. So I stayed away, told myself I was focusing on my future because someone in the family had to be practical. But really, I was just a coward. The office was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic below. I'd imagined this conversation so many times over the years, but never like this. Never with Isabel broken and honest and finally seeing herself clearly. The house was the last thing I had control over, she continued. The last decision I could make that felt important, that felt like leadership instead of running away. And when you fought me on it, when you begged me to wait, to find another way, it reminded me that you were the strong one, that you were the one Mom trusted to take care of things. So you sold it anyway. I sold it because I couldn't stand being the weak sister anymore. Because selling that house was the one thing you couldn't do, and I could. She looked at me with eyes full of regret. I destroyed the thing you loved most because I was jealous that Mom loved you best. The truth hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I was ready to cross. She didn't love me best, I said finally. She loved us differently. But she trusted you more, and she was right to. I thought about trust, about power, about the difference between revenge and justice, about the woman I'd become and the girl I'd been, and the sister sitting across from me who was finally telling the truth. What do you want from me, Isabel? I want to earn back the right to be your sister. And how are you planning to do that? She straightened in her chair, wiping the last of her tears away. By proving I can be someone worth trusting, by working for what I want instead of just taking it, by learning to be strong instead of just surviving on other people's strength. I looked at her for a long moment, seeing not the polished woman who'd married into wealth, but the scared girl who'd never learned how to be vulnerable without being weak. The Riverside project needs a marketing coordinator, someone who understands luxury markets and can handle client relations. The pay is $50,000 a year, which is probably less than you spend on shoes, but it's honest work. Isabel's eyes widened. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to earn something instead of having it given to you. What you do with that chance is up to you. She sat there staring at me, and I could see her calculating the cost of starting over, of swallowing her pride, of working for her little sister in the company that used to belong to her husband. When do I start? Monday, 9 a.m. sharp. And Isabel, I leaned forward, making sure she understood the terms. This isn't charity. This isn't family obligation. If you can't do the job, you're gone. She nodded, standing up to leave. At the door, she turned back. Claire, I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. About the house, about Mom, about all of it. After she left, I sat alone in my office thinking about forgiveness and second chances and the complicated mathematics of family love. I still wasn't sure if Isabel could change, but for the first time in 10 years, I was willing to find out. 6 weeks after Isabel started working for me, I was reviewing her first quarterly marketing report when Daniel knocked on my office door. Not buzzed in by my assistant, not scheduled for a meeting, just knocked like we were colleagues instead of what we actually were. A woman who owned everything and a man learning to live with that reality. Come in, I called, not looking up from Isabel's surprisingly thorough analysis of our target demographics for the Riverside project. Daniel entered with the kind of careful humility that told me he'd been practicing this conversation. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone about to eat a very large piece of crow.
I brought coffee, he said, setting 1 cup on my desk. The good stuff from that place downtown you mentioned liking. I looked up at him, noting the bags under his eyes and the way his once pristine confidence had been replaced by something more genuine, exhaustion mixed with reluctant respect. This feels like a setup for an apology, I said, accepting the coffee, or a resignation. Neither. Both. I don't know. He sat down heavily in the chair Isabel had occupied during her breakdown 6 weeks ago. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "Why didn't you fire me?" The question caught me off guard, though maybe it shouldn't have. In the months since the buyout, Daniel had watched me restructure his company, improve his processes, and fix problems he hadn't even known existed. He'd also watched me give his wife a job she was actually good at, despite their history of taking things from me. Because firing you would have been emotional, not logical. You're good at the technical side of construction management, you just suck at running a business. He winced, but didn't argue. Fair point. Besides, I continued, keeping you on staff sends a message to clients and employees that this wasn't a hostile takeover. It was a rescue operation. Is that what this was? A rescue? I studied his face, looking for traces of the arrogant man who'd dismissed me as the practical sister at his wedding. That man was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned what it felt like to lose control of his own life. What do you think it was? Daniel was quiet for a long moment, sipping his coffee and staring out the window at the construction site where his workers, our workers, were building something that would actually be completed on time and under budget for the first time in his company's recent history. "I think," he said slowly, "it was the most expensive lesson in humility I've ever received." "And what did you learn?" "That I spent so long trying to prove I deserved to inherit my father's company that I never bothered learning how to actually run it." He looked at me with something that might have been admiration. "You've done more to improve this place in 6 months than I managed in 5 years." It was the closest thing to a genuine compliment Daniel had ever given me, and despite everything between us, I felt a small surge of satisfaction. "The company has good bones," I said, unconsciously echoing Eleanor's words about distressed properties. It just needed someone who could see past the damage to what it could become. Like you did with the Riverside project. Isabel showed me her marketing analysis. It's brilliant. She's found angles I never would have thought of. Your wife is smarter than either of us gave her credit for. She just needed a chance to prove it to herself. Daniel nodded, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Claire, I need to tell you something. About the house. About what happened back then." My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "Daniel, no, please, let me say this." He leaned forward, his voice urgent. "I pushed Isabel to sell that house. Not because we needed the money. We would have been fine without it. I pushed her because I wanted to test whether she was willing to choose our future over your past." The admission hit me like a physical blow. I'd always assumed Isabel had made the decision on her own, that Daniel had just been a convenient excuse. You made it a test? I was young and stupid and insecure about whether she really loved me or was just using me to escape her old life. So I made her prove it by cutting ties with everything that came before me. His voice was thick with regret. "I turned your family trauma into a loyalty test, and I've regretted it every day since." I set down my coffee cup, my hands trembling slightly. "Does Isabel know?" "She knows now. I told her last week after she came home from that night she talked to you drunk. She was so angry she didn't speak to me for 3 days. Good for her."
Claire, I know I can't undo what I did. I know that apologizing doesn't give you back what you lost, but I need you to know that watching you save this company, watching you give Isabel a chance to be more than just my wife, watching you be better than I ever was, it's taught me what real strength looks like. I studied his face, looking for manipulation or self-serving motives. All I saw was a man who'd spent months watching someone else fix his mistakes and finally understood the cost of his own selfishness. What are you asking me, Daniel? I'm asking if there's a way for us to work together that doesn't involve me feeling like I'm being punished every day for sins I can't undo.
I'm asking if you can see me as an employee you can trust instead of an enemy you're keeping close. It was a fair question. I'd been holding Daniel at arm's length, using his guilt and my power to keep him uncomfortable, unsure of his place in his own former company. It had felt like justice, but it wasn't sustainable. Not if I wanted to build something lasting. Can you handle taking orders from the practical sister? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since the buyout. I think I can manage. The practical sister knows what she's doing. Then let's try something new. Let's try being colleagues. As Daniel left my office that day, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. For months, I'd been operating from a position of justified anger, using my power to balance the scales of old hurts. But power used only for punishment eventually becomes poisonous to the person wielding it and everyone around them. Maybe it was time to use my power for something more constructive than revenge. Maybe it was time to build something that honored what I'd lost, instead of just punishing the people who'd taken it from me. The invitation came on a Saturday morning, handwritten on simple cardstock. Nothing like the expensive wedding invitation Isabel had sent me years ago. Just my name in her careful script and an address I recognized immediately. She wanted to meet me at our childhood home. I sat in my car outside 847 Maple Street for 10 minutes before I found the courage to get out. The house looked different. Actually, better. The new owners had painted it a soft blue gray instead of the white Mom had chosen, and they'd added a wraparound porch that somehow made the whole structure look more substantial, more loved. But it was still our house. Still the place where Mom had taught me that home was about the love you put into every corner. Isabel was waiting on the front steps, looking smaller than I'd seen her since we were children. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, no designer armor, no perfect makeup, just my sister, looking nervous and hopeful and scared. "Thank you for coming," she said as I approached. "Why here, Isabel?" "Because this is where it started, where I made the choice that broke us." She gestured toward the house where I could see children's toys scattered across the front yard and hear the sound of laughter coming from inside. I wanted to see what we lost, what I threw away. We stood there in silence for a moment, two grown women staring at the place that shaped us both in different ways. "Do you know what I thought about this morning?" Isabel asked quietly. "I thought about the time Mom made us paint the fence together. You were maybe 8, I was 11. We got more paint on ourselves than on the fence, and Mom just laughed and took pictures." I remembered that day. Isabel had been bossy and impatient, complaining that I was too slow, too messy. But when Mom came outside and saw us covered in white paint, giggling like fools, she declared it the most beautiful fence in the neighborhood. "You told Mom I was doing it wrong," I said. "You told Mom I was doing everything wrong for years because I thought there was only one right way to do things, my way. I spent so long trying to be perfect, trying to be the daughter who never made mistakes, that I forgot how to be your sister." A woman emerged from the house, probably in her 30s, with two small children clinging to her legs. She saw us sitting on her steps and approached with the cautious friendliness of someone who wasn't sure if we were lost or dangerous. "Can I help you, ladies?" "We used to live here," I said, standing up. "I hope you don't mind us sitting for a moment. We were just remembering." Her expression softened immediately. "Oh, you're the Ramirez girls. Mrs. Henderson next door told me about your family. She said your mother kept the most beautiful garden." "She did," Isabel said, her voice thick with emotion. "Would you like to see the backyard? We've tried to keep her rose bushes alive. Mrs. Henderson gave us some tips." I looked at Isabel, who nodded, and we followed the woman around to the back of the house. Mom's garden was smaller than I remembered, but the roses were blooming. Deep red ones that she'd planted the year before she got sick, white ones that had been her mother's favorites. "She must have loved this place very much," the woman said, watching us take in the sight of Mom's surviving roses. "She did," I said. "We all did." After the woman and her children went back inside, Isabel and I sat on the small bench that had been placed near the rose bushes. Not the same bench where Mom used to sit, but close enough to make my chest tight with memory. I need to tell you something about the job you gave me, about working for you. If you're quitting, I'm not quitting. I'm thriving. She turned to face me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen since we were children. Genuine pride in her own accomplishments. For the first time in my life, I'm earning something instead of just receiving it. Do you know what that feels like? Yes, I do, I said quietly. The Riverside project launches next month, and every detail of that marketing campaign is mine. Every client meeting, every strategy session, every success. I built that. She wiped tears from her eyes. You gave me the chance to discover who I could be when I wasn't just trying to be someone's perfect wife or favorite daughter. You earned it, Isabel. I just gave you the opportunity. And I know I can't undo selling this house. I can't give you back what I took from you. But maybe, she gestured toward the roses, toward the house where another family was building their own memories. Maybe I can help you build something new. Something even better than what we lost. I thought about what better might look like. Not the perfect childhood home frozen in time, but something living and growing and strong enough to survive whatever storms came. I have an idea for the company, for us. What kind of idea? What if we specialized in restoration projects? Old houses that need saving, buildings with good bones that other people have given up on. I looked at our childhood home, thinking about Eleanor's lessons on seeing potential in damaged things. What if we made it our mission to save the places other people think are beyond repair? Isabel was quiet for a long moment, considering. You mean, like what you did with Carter Enterprises? Like what we did with Carter Enterprises? Like what we're doing with ourselves? A second chance company. A second chance company, I agreed. As we sat there among Mom's roses, I realized this was what closure actually looked like. Not getting back what was lost, but building something new from the pieces that remained. Not perfect forgiveness, but the choice to move forward together. Claire, Isabel's voice was soft, uncertain. Do you think Mom would be proud of who we've become? I thought about Maria Ramirez, who taught me that home wasn't something someone could take from you because you carried it inside, who showed me that love meant seeing someone's potential and giving them the space to grow into it. I think she'd be proud that we finally figured out how to be sisters. We drove away from Maple Street that day in separate cars, heading towards separate lives that were finally moving in the same direction. In my rearview mirror, I watched our childhood home disappear behind the trees, and for the first time since losing it, I felt at peace.